Hello and welcome to Code Tutorials. Today we'll take a look at the Divided Device slider, another one of the widgets in the key add-ons for Elementor Premium Collection. The Divided Device slider will help you create stunning page elements with layered images and text, as well as all the nifty touches like navigation, buttons for additional information, and more. This is an image showcasing a possible design solution for this widget. You can also take a closer look at this design by following the link below. I'll do that in a minute, just as soon as we've examined the page we're currently on. Below this example, we have a short highlights list with some widget features pointed out. And after that, another example image, this one static, but there to illustrate the wide range of looks you can create with this widget. Alright, let's go back to the link with the first example and open it up. It's taking us to a homepage demo belonging to the key theme. I'm showing it to you for two reasons. One, because I'll be copying this design for the tutorial. And two, to demonstrate how well the Divided Device slider can work as a full page element. The images and titles move through the slider automatically, but you can also switch them yourself by using the navigation arrows. The device frame layered over the slider can be any shape you want. There's an option to upload a custom PNG. And the images placed in the frame are entirely independent of the rest of the images in the slider. There's also the main text, which is stationary and accompanied by these two buttons. Everything is customizable, and I'll show you how in the upcoming tutorial. So let's head over to the back end. I have a new page that I will be working in. The first thing I need to do now is add the widget I want. Let me find it. Divided Device slider. There. Drag it over to the page. And this is what the widget looks like by default. Before we dive into its options, I want to set some things up. Namely, I want to make it full width. For this to work, you need to use a page template that allows full width content. That's something you can adjust in the page settings. Alright. In terms of the options here, I'll click on the section in the navigator to open the section editing options. Then, under layout, I'll change the content width option to full width. Okay, better. Next, I'll open the column editing options. And then, under advanced, I'll reset the margin and padding options. I can do that simply by clicking on this chain icon that will disconnect the input fields and reset their values to 0. I'll do the same for the padding option. With this, I've eliminated any empty space that was left over between my element and the page edges. So that's most of the setup done. I do plan on adding a background image to the section, but I will be doing that at the end so it doesn't interfere with our view as we set everything else up. Alright, let's dive into the Divided Device slider options now. You can access them by clicking anywhere within the element. And there they are on the left. Looking at the options, we'll start from the top. That means customizing the content. And the first thing we'll do is change this text. That's done using this field here, Content Title. Simply type over the dummy text that's already here. Give me a moment while I type in the replacement text. Okay, there we go. We can see it appeared on the page right away. And actually, I can close the navigator. I won't be needing it anytime soon. Okay. So this is the new text, and there's a nifty option that you can use with it, the position of different colored words. Here we can enter the order number of particular words we want to set apart from the rest by giving them a different color. For example, I'll set 2 here, and now my second word is slightly lighter than the rest. You can change the color using the style options. In the content style section, you have the content title different color option, which allows you to pick whatever color you like for the words you want to stress. For example, a contrasting red. Okay, I'll clear this as I don't plan to use the different colored words option. And I'll remove the 2 as well. There. The next few options are for the buttons, starting with button text 1. This is button 1 and this is button 2. I'll replace the text for both. Just a sec. I'm deliberately using lowercase. And then we have the button link 1 field where we need to add a URL for the button target page. I'll set a hash symbol here. It will make the button look properly linked. And then I'll do the same for the second button. I'll give it some new text and another hash symbol. Okay, done. If we look at the page, we can see that both buttons now show the new text. The next option we have is the device frame. It's set to mobile, so we get the frame of a mobile phone in the slider. We can replace that with tablet, which looks like this. Or we can pick laptop as our frame. If you get that incongruence, you can either adjust the image width or the device frame width. And last but not least, we have the custom frame setting. With that one, you get a field where you can upload a custom PNG image showing whatever frame you like. I have a frame already prepared for that, so I'll be using it. That's it. Select. And here it is on the page. Next, we can set the device maximum width. I'm using a custom image for the frame, and that image has had its maximum width already set during design, so it's not going to expand past a certain point. But for frames that don't have their maximum width already nailed down, you can set it here. You can see how the frame changes as I drag the slider, or you can type in a specific value if you prefer. So this option will allow you to specify how wide the device frame can get. This isn't an absolute value. The device frame is still responsive and will adjust to smaller screens. This option is simply a way to limit how far it can expand. Alright, with that we come to the items. Each item represents a slide in the slider. When I open the first one, we can see it has room for two images, a main image and a device image. So within one item we can replace both of the slide's visuals. But before I start customizing my content, I'm going to skip down to slider settings and switch the slider autoplay option to no. This will stop the slides from moving, so the content I'm replacing will stay visible on the screen. Okay, going back to the items. I'll open the first one again and click to replace the main image. I have the one I want in my media library. This is it. Select. And here it is on the page. Next, the device image. It's also ready in my media library. There it is. Select. Okay, this is what my slide visuals look like now. Following that, we can replace the title text associated with this slide. Currently, we have this dummy text that's kind of hard to see since it's dark on a dark background. Still, I'll replace it now while I'm customizing all my content, and later on I'll change its color when we start exploring the style options. Then we have the subtitle text, which I'll replace as well. One moment. There we go. Once the slider reloads, we'll have the new text on the page. Again, it's hard to see at the moment, but I'll be fixing that later. Okay, we have one more thing in the item options, the link field. You can add a URL here that will be anchored to the title and subtitle text. You can pick whatever target page you like, but I'll set a hash symbol here to make the text seem linked, since this is just a tutorial. Okay, that's the first item done. Now I'm going to skip ahead while I create and customize more slides. Here we are. I have 4 slides in total, and if I use the navigation arrows, we can click through the slider to see all the changes. We can see there are all new images. I kept the title and subtitle the same, again just for the tutorial. Next to that, the text and buttons on the right stay visible and everything is working as it should. Okay, under the item settings we have one more option, text animation. It allows us to pick an appear animation for the text within the slider. It applies to both the text on the right-hand side as well as the title and subtitle text placed in the bottom left corner. By default, it's set to fade in from bottom, but you can replace that with fade in from right, which has the text sort of gliding in from the right. You can see it better on the text on the right side. But let me switch the slides because the lighter background of the other images will make the title and subtitle text show the animation more clearly. That was the fade in from right setting. Other than that, we have the letter by letter setting, and this is the one I'll be keeping. I'll move through the sliders so you can see the effect on all my text content. Okay, with that we covered the general section of the content options and we can move on to the slider settings section. Here we have the change slides on scroll. By keeping it enabled, we can navigate through the slider using mouse scroll instead of just navigation arrows. See, when I scroll, okay, the page moves as well because I have extra room, but the slides switch nonetheless. So it's a handy thing to have if you want to use the divide the device slider as a sole element on the page. Still, in this instance, I'll set the slides of scroll to no. Okay, after that, we have the slider height option. It does exactly as it says. So if I start to move the slider, we can see how the element height changes. You can adjust this to cover the whole screen or to be more like a band on the page. I'll clear the change to restore the default value. Next, there's the option to enable slider loop. It's set to yes by default, and it's what allows the slides to move in a loop instead of finishing when you reach the last slide. It's a very useful thing for sliders, so I'll keep it enabled. Then we have the Enable Slider Autoplay option. I used it earlier to stop the slider from moving, but if I switched it back to yes, then the slides will simply move by themselves. No need for me to use the navigation. And with this movement on, I can set the slide duration, or the amount of time in milliseconds that the slide will be shown before the next one replaces it. The default setting is 5000 milliseconds, but let me show you the difference if I set 200, for example. Now the slides move much quicker, and the whole element is more dynamic, but it's making it hard to read the text that goes with each slide, so I'll clear the change to restore the default duration, and switch the slider autoplay back to no. I'm keeping the movement disabled while I work, but I plan to enable it when my slider is complete. Alright. Under that, we have the Enable Slider Navigation option. The default setting is actually yes, so we have these navigation arrows here. But if I replace that with no, then the arrows vanish, and in that case you'd rely on the slider autoplay to keep things moving. For my design, I'll keep the navigation enabled. This brings us to the next section, buttons. The options you see here are typical button options, and we cover them in detail in a separate video dedicated to the key button widget. Therefore, I'll simply make the changes I need here, and if you need an in-depth explanation of the options, you can check out the video linked here. For the layout, I'll set textual. That results in this look on the page. And if you're using the textual button layout, then you can enable a button text underline. It results in this line under the button text that reacts on hover. I don't plan to use it, so I'll switch the setting back to no. After this, we have the button icon section. This is where we can select or upload an icon that would stand next to the button text. You can pick something from the icon library, but I'll use a custom icon. This is it. Insert media. Okay, here it is. Both buttons have an icon now. It looks a bit different on the page than you'd expect, but that's because of the default size setting. I'll be changing that later on. Okay, this section also contains the icon position option. By default, the icon is to the right of the button text, but we can move it to the left if we prefer. Then it would look something like this. I'll put mine back on the right. Next, we have the Developer Tools section. It contains just one option. If you switch it to yes, then it will display the widget in the form of a WordPress shortcode. The light gray text you see on the page, you can copy this text or use elsewhere on your site. Alright, I'll switch this back to no. And under that, we have the Help section. It contains links to various helpful resources in case you need them. And that's all for the options in the Content tab. Let's move on to the Style tab now. The first section will help us adjust some general aspects of the slider, such as the content position. This refers to the text that's currently on the right, so it comes after the slider. However, you can move it to be before the slider if you prefer. Then you'll have the text on the left and the slider images on the right. For the design I'm making, I need the text back where it was, so the content position will be after slider. Then we have the content width. This option allows us to set the percentage of slider width that will be dedicated to the text content, and any leftover space will be taken up by the slide images. I'll set 70 for this. And now 70% of my slider is made up of the main text and its background, with the remaining 30% covered by the image on the left. Let me show you how the slider behaves if I increase the value a bit. We can see how the text portion of the element expands and starts to push the image back. So the text content gets wider, which means the slide images will shrink back. You can fine-tune this to your preference. I'll go back to using 70% for my content width value. The option after this is for setting the content padding. Might be easier to show you if I use percentages instead of pixels. When I change the value, you will be able to see how the space around the text adjusts. I'll set, for example, 20 pixels. This has pushed the text inward. And if I increase from here, we can see how the text keeps getting more compact as I keep increasing the padding around it. I'm going to clear this because I want to keep the default values. But if you want to make any changes, you can also set different values for different sides. Simply click here to disconnect the fields, and then you'll be able to enter differing values in these fields. Following the padding, the next option we have is the device image border radius. It allows us to curve the corners of the image within the device frame. I'll use percentages while showing you this. So, pay attention to the image corners. When I begin to add the radius, the corners start to smooth out and disappear from view. And if you overdo it, you can even create a gap between the image and the device frame. For my part, I'll set 15% here. Okay, don't worry about the right side not fitting, I'll fix that with our next option, device image offsets. I'm going to disconnect the fields right away. This has reset the offset and cleared the default values. And now I can enter my own. Those are going to be 4 pixels at the top, 6 on the right, 3 at the bottom, and 6 on the left. Perfect. And now the image I have within my device frame fits perfectly. Okay, that's it for the first section. The next one, content style, is for adjusting the look of the text on the right. With the options here, we can change its HTML tag. You can pick anything from H1 to H6 or even the B tag. I'll use H1. This is what I get. My text is more noticeable now. Following that, we can change the text color. You can easily set any shade you like. I'll clear this for now and circle back to it once I've adjusted the background. Okay. The next option is one we already examined, the content title different color. If you recall, it allows us to pick a color that would be applied only to select words in the text. After that, we have the content title typography. This is a collection of several options. Here we can change the font family. There is a large selection for you to choose from. Then we can pick the font size. You can use this input field or the slider. Up to you. Following that, we can change the font weight. Simply pick one of the settings in this drop-down. Next, there's the transform option. It can turn the text to uppercase or lowercase, capitalize it or leave it normal, which is the way we typed it in. Then we have the style option, which can change the text from normal, which is the default, to italic or oblique. After that, the decoration option will let us add a line under, over, or through the text if we want to. Finally, we have 3 options for adjusting different spacing aspects of the typography. Those are the line height, letter spacing, and word spacing, in case you need to adjust anything there. And that's it for typography. I'll close this now. After the typography, we have the content title margin bottom option. We can use it to adjust the space under the text and before the buttons. You can see how it changes. I'll clear this to keep the default value. Alright. Next, let's check out the item style section. These options apply to the text content in the slides, so we'll be looking at this side now. The first thing I'll do is change the title color, so we can see the text. Mine will be plain white. There it is. And I'll do the same for the subtitle, since I also have some text for that. Perfect. Now when we look at the slide, we can see both pieces of text. The next thing I want to do is change the HTML tag for the slide's title. Instead of H3, I'll use H2. Okay, we already changed the color, so the option after that is the title typography. When I open it, you can see that it contains all the same options we've already examined. And since I don't plan on making any changes here, I'll simply close it and carry on. Then we have the subtitle color, which I've already changed. And after that, the subtitle typography. Again, it has all the same options we've seen before, so I'll change what I need for my design and we can move on. There are several things, starting with the font family. I have a specific one in mind, give me a second. There. Then I'll change the size to 13 pixels. Okay. Next, I'll use the transform option to make my subtitle text uppercase. And this is the look I get. There's one more thing I want to change, and that is the letter spacing. I'll set 1 pixel for that. Okay, and that's it for my typography changes. I'll close this. This leaves us with just one more option for item style, and that is the subtitle margin bottom. With it, we can adjust the amount of space under the subtitle text. If I change it, you can see how the space shifts. As the value here, I'll set -5 pixels to bring the subtitle a bit closer to the title. Okay. After this, we have the button style section. The first option here is for adjusting the space between buttons. So we're looking at the space here. If I start to move the slider, we can see how the gap changes. For this, I'll set 45 pixels. Then we have the button text typography settings. I want to make a few changes here, so give me a second. I'll set a new font family and increase the size to 35 pixels. This has affected both the icons and text, so we can properly see the icon I added. Following that, I'll set the weight to 400 normal. Then there's the transform option. If you look at the button text, it's in lowercase, and I deliberately entered it that way. But if I hadn't, or if I changed my mind and wanted a different look, then the transform option is there to help. Okay, one more thing. I want to set the style to italic. Okay, there. Under typography, we have two switches, normal and hover. They reveal different options for different button displays. One normal and one when you're hovering over the button. Under normal, we have the text color. You can pick any shade you like and it will apply to both button text and the icon. I'll clear this for now and circle back to it later, once I've changed the background for this part of the element. Okay, if we look under hover, we'll find the text hover color option. If we set a new color here, for example this, then hovering over the button will reveal its new color. Alright, that's it for the button style options. The next section in line is the button icon style. The options here will help us style the icons next to the button text. I'm going to change their size, so we're looking at these arrow icons. I'll set 45 pixels for mine. After that, we have another split between normal and hover settings. Under normal, we have the icon color. With it, we can set a new color for the icons, so they will differ from the button text. You can see the red I set as an example. I'll clear it for now and return to it later. I'm delaying the change because I plan to set white as the color for all the content on the right-hand side of the element. And until I change the background, that would make my text effectively invisible. That's why I'm putting it off for later. Okay, let's see what we have under hover. There is one option here, and it's the move icon. It provides us with an animation effect that appears over the button when we hover. The default setting is horizontal short, and on the page it looks like this. The other possible settings are horizontal, which when we hover looks like this. There's also vertical, which gives us this effect. Then there's diagonal. It has the icon moving upward diagonally. And finally, we can pick none, which will remove any effects, so the icon will be stationary on hover. For my design, I'll go back to using horizontal short. Give it a sec to load, and there it is. Following that, we have the icon margin option. When setting this, you should take into account your icon shape and what position you want it to have. For my part, I'll only make a tiny change. Delink the fields to reset the values, and then enter 30 pixels for the left side margin. With the new value, I now have this space here. That's all I need. After this, we have the button inner border style section. However, if I open it, we can see that it's empty. That's because I have a textual button and not one with an inner border. Therefore, I'm not going to have options for something I'm not using. And the same thing applies to the button underline style section. It's empty as well because I didn't enable a button text underline. But the section after that, the slider navigation style, does have some options for me. With these options, we can change the look of the navigation arrows in the bottom right corner. So we can choose to hide the navigation on screens below a certain width. If you pick something here, then these arrows can stop showing on something like tablet or mobile phone screens. I'll set them to vanish on screens below 1024 pixels, which is approximately the width of a landscape orientation on an iPad. There is no need to crowd them on a smaller screen when users will be able to use swiping for navigation. After this, we can set the space between arrows. This is simply how much room we'll have between the two navigation arrows. You can see the gap is bigger now. I'll set 20 pixels for this. Okay, there. Next, there's the navigation vertical offset option. We can use it to move the navigation arrows up or down. For the value here, I'll set 103 pixels. And now the navigation arrows are lower than before. To go with this, we also have the navigation horizontal offset option for moving the arrows left or right. You can see how they shift as I move the slider. So the value you add is measured from the right edge of the element. For this, I'll set 45 pixels. And with my arrows positioned where I want them to be, I can now pick whether to keep the default arrow icons, choose new ones from the icon library, or upload a custom SVG. I'll add custom icons. First, for arrow previous or the left arrow, I'll be using the same look and style as the icons I added to my buttons. So select and insert media. Okay, there it is. And I'll do the same for arrow next, or the right arrow. This is it. Insert. Now my navigation is represented by brand new arrow icons. After picking the icons, the next thing we can set is the navigation holder width. That's the space that holds the navigation arrows. To best show you how it changes, I'll set a background color for it. Something that will make it easier to see. Maybe a lighter shade. Okay. So with the background color set, if I start to increase the holder width, we can see how the space stretches. And we have a similar option for the navigation holder height. By increasing it, we can increase the height of the space that contains the navigation arrows. I'm going to set 180 pixels for both the width and the height. Okay, there. As we can see, the change in the holder size has affected the positioning of the navigation arrows. The next thing I want to do is remove the navigation background color. I set it so we could see how the space changes, but I don't actually plan to use it for my design. Following that, we have the border type option. By picking one of the settings in this drop-down, we can add a border around the navigation. I'm going to use solid for my design. Then I need to give it some width so it will appear. That'll be 1 pixel. Then I can change its color. We have this familiar color picker for that. I'll circle back to this option later. Like the text content, I plan to make it white, which will make it invisible without a change to the background. Okay, after that we have the navigation border radius. It allows us to curve the corners of the holder space, and therefore the border. I'll add 100 pixels to all sides, and since the fields are still connected, I can enter it once. There, this has given my border a round shape. Alright. The next thing we have are 2 switches for revealing options that determine the look of our navigation when displayed normally and when it's hovered over. Under normal, we can change the navigation arrow color. Anything you set will be immediately visible on the page. Let me clear this, as I plan to turn it white later on. Besides the arrow color, the other thing we have here is the navigation arrow background color option. When I set a new color, you can see this is just the background for the arrows. It will not fill all the space within the border. That's what we'd use the navigation background color option for. Alright, let's see what's under hover. Here we have the navigation arrow hover color. So you can set a new color here and it will become visible only while hovering. Okay, I'll clear this and we can look at the next option, which is the navigation arrow background hover color. With that one, any color we set would appear on hover as the arrow background. Alright, I'll clear this too. Next, we have the Enable Hover Arrow Move option. It's active by default, but you can disable it by switching it to No. Then the arrows will stay stationary on hover. My design involves using this, so I'll switch it back to Yes. And now if I check, the arrow moves when I hover over it. Okay, let's see the rest of the options here. We have the navigation arrow size. It's just what it says. I'll put 45 pixels for this. There, the arrows are noticeably bigger now. After that, we have the navigation arrow holder width option. It is not to be confused with the navigation holder width option. The navigation holder width option, which we examined earlier, treats the navigation arrows as a unit and adjusts the space that holds them jointly. Whereas the navigation arrow holder width option treats the arrows as separate and applies the value you set to each of them individually. So if I start to increase the navigation arrow holder width, you can see how the arrows draw apart. And the same goes for the navigation arrow holder height option. The value you set is applied to each of the arrows rather than them both as a single entity. I'll clear the width and height settings. The adjustments I've made before are more than enough for getting the look I want. Alright, we are nearing the end of the video, which means I need to sort out what I've been putting off all along, namely the background and color changes for the right-hand side of my element. To help me with this, I'll open the navigator. So right-click and there it is. Now it's much easier for me to open the options I need. I just need to click on the section to get the options for editing it on the left. Once there, I'll open the Style tab and go to the background type option. Select Classic and use the image field to add a visual as the background. This is the one I want. Select. Just a sec while the slider loads. Okay, there it is. With this new darker background, I can start changing the text content to white. So I'll click on the Divided Device slider in the navigation to reopen its options. And I'll be quick here as we've already gone over these options. I'll simply be changing the settings now. Starting with the Content Style section, I'll change the content title color. Then in Button Style, I'll change the text color. And lastly, in the Slider Navigation Style, I need to change the border color, as well as the background, and all the text and icons are clearly visible. There's one more thing I have to do, and that is to enable autoplay in the Content tab. I need the Slider Settings section and to switch the autoplay setting to Yes. I'll close the navigator now. I'm done and won't be needing it anymore. Now if we look at the slider, I don't have to use the navigation. The autoplay will have the slides shifting on their own. And we can see all the content I set here, both text and images, and everything looks good. I'll hit update to save my work. With that, our look into the Divided Device slider is done. As a reminder, the page we started from contains highlights about this element, as well as the link to the Key Theme Demo homepage showcasing the design I used for this tutorial. Hopefully, you found this guide helpful. If you have any questions after watching this video, or comments or suggestions you'd like to make, please drop us a line in the comment section below. Also, make sure to subscribe and be the first to learn about any new tutorials on our channel. Thank you for watching.